end of last time, Marissa, some of what you said, it was very helpful to me to hear, because especially in starting this process, I'm on the front side of determining how I can best, help and influence communities wherever, I might be able to, and wherever the Lord might have me to. But hearing things about how valuable information is that I don't know who has it or doesn't have it, or where it might be placed. And so just hearing it in a different way, as you've been doing such good work, was helpful to me. And so I think I left wondering, to what might have come from that for the two of you, and what else might have come up in terms of questions or thoughts about even just what we dug into last time.
So I don't know if I have thoughts specifically about what we talked about last time, but things I'm just in my mind, I'm always thinking about the things that come up frequently, or that have come up for me or for other foster parents I've talked with. And probably the two topics that I hear the most about, or I see the most questions about in the Facebook group, are kind of the attachment and how do we build that, and how do we heal? Like, I don't remember if I shared last time we talked, I saw a video about how important birth to 5 is, and how important it is to have all this, connection. And I was like, okay, but when you give me a 6 or 10-year-old, you need to tell me how to heal that. When that, it's really easy to watch that and feel like, oh, well, it's set in stone now. There's nothing I can do.
No pressure, right?
Right, exactly. So there's that piece. And then the other one that comes up a lot is sort of how to handle adoption questions and issues, and when do you tell your kid, and how do you handle their questions, and how do you deal with birth family questions or connections or meeting, or all of those pieces that come up around adoption. I had a very interesting conversation with my son this week about where he was telling me how he chose me because he knew I wanted a baby, and so it was very interesting. I was quickly texting my friend who used to be a child therapist going, is this normal? Is this, what does this mean?
I think that both of these are probably our next two topics. Those are two that I absolutely would have said are foundational for people to hear on, because when we deal with these things, I always tell adopted parents on both of these things, how do you do attachment and really consider that long-term, and the adoption issues and questions and all of that, one of the biggest problems, I think, probably in people in general, but especially it gets brought to the surface in adoptive families, is this perpetual cultural belief that we have that we can know and be certain of things. Mm-hmm. And as adoptive parents, and foster parents, you guys know that we have to get rid of that. I mean, it's purged out of us from early on. And to make it in this, we have to learn to balance that. I mean, I learned to balance that. We deal with that teaching counselors how to pull away from that. And being a foster adoptive parent is like push into the deep end, set you on fire, and like you have to get out of that mindset or you don't survive. And so I always start with that too on both of those. Of it's not like there's some magic way to do this that people just haven't heard of yet. That it is all process, both of them. And I'd love to unpack each of those, and we can pick one to do today, and maybe we can set the tone for the next one to do fully too. So I wonder which one you'd like to start with.
And then I also had another issue that I thought we should talk about, which is that's been going on in my home is blending children from different families. One child was used to being the oldest, and now they're the youngest, or now they're in the middle, and they're used to being in charge because they're the oldest, or just blending different families who aren't used to being together. To almost instant family roles. Their family roles have dramatically changed, and how to help them process new family roles.
So good.
Yeah, I think we might be able to dovetail some of those. I wanted to piggyback off of what Dina was saying, the more expertise you have, the more you know that you don't know. And so, sometimes when I'm listening to a podcast or listening to somebody who's, an expert, you're in the presence of an expert when they say, it all depends. And the folks who sound like experts tend to be people that have a lot of confidence about their opinions, but confidence in your opinion doesn't necessarily make it a good opinion for you to follow. So I really like what you're saying, Dina, that that there is, there's a lot of what I would call mystery. There's a lot of unknown. There's a lot of uncertainty, and it all depends. So please, those of you who are watching, we are non-expert experts. We're practicing clinical humility here because we recognize that you are the biggest expert of your home situation, and we can, throw some ideas up that may or may not be useful to you, and we're really interested in hearing back from you what might be helpful. Stacy, I'm wondering, Dina, could I do a little thing about attachment styles and connected to what Stacy has brought up here in terms of the challenge of bringing new kids into systems that are already formed. Last time we talked a lot about systems and changes. I think I could do that in about 3 minutes and then pass it over back to you. Would that be okay?
Yeah, I think that'd be great. And then I would love to talk about building attachment and what that looks like post-5 and normalizing some things about that.
Fantastic. So one of the things that we know from the research around attachment, this is Mary Ainsworth and some other researchers, and I'll put a link in for the video so you can see just what they're looking at in this research with toddlers, even kids before they're verbal, that we notice that the attachment style that a kid uses to attach or to connect to their parenting person vary based partially on nurture and on, kind of their genetic makeup. Some kids are much more timid. They're slow to warm up. They have stranger anxiety. They might have, those are all kind of attachment styles, that when it comes, when I need someone's help, what do I do in that moment? And that's what we refer to as an attachment style. And there are 2 basic attachment styles, and you'll know them immediately when I describe them because you'll see them in your adult relationships as well, and maybe even in your significant others if you have a significant other. The one attachment style is what we call help me out here, Dina. The attachment style where you're thinking, what's the word?
I was thinking secure and insecure as the
Well, I
basic.
was thinking about it begins with the P, but I can't remember right now, so I'll go with the other one. So the second attachment style is the withdrawing attachment style. And this means when I need help, I don't let people know. I withdraw. I go into a corner. I don't tell people that I need help. So we call that a withdrawing attachment style. The other attachment style is the attachment style that is quick to complain, that's going to go forward and ask for help, in fact, demand help when I need help. So Stacy, when I'm thinking about your challenge of bringing preoccupied, anxious, thank you, Dina, there it is. I knew there was a P word in there somewhere. So preoccupied, anxious. When I need help, I get anxious and I seek people to help reassure me. Each of us on the call has a standard attachment style. Males stereotypically tend to be withdrawers. When we need help, we go into our caves. Women stereotypically, is not always true. When we need help, are going to ask for help, are going to seek it out and look for it and sometimes demand it. Sometimes in a marriage, if you have a marriage between a man and a woman, if the woman has a preoccupied, anxious style and the man has a withdrawing style, she's going to look for help and come to him and he's going to say, I don't want this. And he's going to go into his cave. And then we get a little dynamic going on there. So Stacy, in terms of attachment and the challenges of like bringing new kids in, how do you know a kid's distressed by a change that's just happened? Let's say you brought a kid in, you've already got a system of 4 kids going on. Now you've brought a kid into the middle of it. Some of those kids are going to be more verbal and preoccupied and complaining about the change. Other kids are going to be kind of turning away and not asking for help and kind of going silent or going stealth. sometimes, we like those kids because they're not a problem kid, right? They're the invisible, the middle child who gets lost between the cracks. So let me just kind of put that out as one piece of attachment, and that has to do with your attachment style. And then we have the two other kinds, which are secure and chaotic. And Dina maybe is going to lead into that, because folks that have had, as Marissa said, early childhood traumas are likely to have a kind of chaotic attachment style, which is kind of come close, go away, come close, go away. I want you because I need you. No, I don't want you that badly, because wanting or needing somebody is dangerous, right? If I've been hurt by people who are supposed to love me, needing them or wanting someone or needing help is going to feel like an invitation to be hurt again. So those kids that are withdrawing or chaotic are ignoring their needs, because if I'm needy, that's going to set me up for somebody to hurt me again. And with that, I will turn it over to Dina and see what you want to do with that. Stacy, can I get a head nod? Is there something in there, in terms of how each kid manages the transition is going to be determined by their attachment style? Go ahead, Dina.
And I'll just dovetail on that just at the very end before we go into some of the other attachment things, that one of the things that I found that can be the most difficult, and I always say this, I think I said it last time at some point, and I'll say it probably in every single conversation that we have, that so often when we look at this from a family system perspective, which is going to be my overlay on this all the time, we're looking at not only the system that's happening around us with the kids. So like we're bringing a new person into this family system and everybody has to rearrange, right? But we're part of that system as the parents, and we're the most influential people in that system. Even for children who come in with trauma backgrounds and who are struggling actively, we are still the most influential piece in the system, and research supports that in terms of, especially in adoption and in families that are sometimes moving, that our mindsets and the way we're doing things are more influential than what we are dealing with and what's going on around us. And so when I think about the process of rearranging, as parents at times, we tend to buy into, again, some cultural and kind of colloquial ideas of parenting that seem like they're right, because that's how it kind of goes for families that are typical. And so we just accept these norms as templates, when that's really not what it is. It just happens to be the norm. And so one of those that I say, and this is for very common in United States culture especially, is that a norm in our culture is that we work to make sure our kids don't struggle, and that our kids suffer as less as we can possibly make sure it happens. And so that's not necessarily a bad goal. It's not that it's wrong in and of itself. It's just that it's not as concrete and hard and fast as we oftentimes have it in our minds. And so when I'm working with families, I oftentimes address expectations, just like going into a marriage. You have expectations that things are going to be a certain way because that's what was normal for you. Typically, people struggle on the other side of that because maybe it was normal a different way for the other person. Well, in the same way, if I go into my family and we've got this in and out of children coming at times, and it disrupts our family system. If my mindset is that part of my job is to make sure that my kids don't struggle or suffer, or that I never do things or make decisions that my kids suffer or struggle from, then in addition to having this problem in front of us to deal with and manage, we also have shame and internal issues that can cause us to spend the emotional energy in a different place when we really need that emotional energy to pour out on what's going on around us. So I always encourage parents to look at their own structures too, of what's your expectations about this as kids are coming in and out. Do we expect that our kids could have another child come into a home and things to rearrange and it not be hard? And if that's a deep embedded belief that this could be a possible, then we're just going to feel like we're failing all the time. And the truth is, no, it's not possible. It's not possible. It's going to be hard, and we do hard things, right? So we adjust. I talk to foster and adoptive parents all the time about adjusting our measuring sticks. We adjust what we're using to measure. If we're trying to measure, a a tree with you're trying to measure the height of a tree with a scale. There's no way that we're ever going to be able to give an accurate response, right? We have to know what the measuring method is. You can't weigh a tree and get the height. It's not possible. So when we look at this type of systems issue, family systems issue, we say, what's the real goal here? The real goal is not that kids don't struggle. It's that we teach them young how to struggle well and connect and struggle. And we use the things around us at our disposal to connect. And by proxy, often we build attachment, because you can't build attachment if there's not problems to solve and if there's nothing to ask for. And that's kind of where I would curtail into this too. And I'll give a little brief piece on this, and then I'm going to pause and get some feedback from y'all too. But when I start talking to people about attachment, and I, just as a reminder, I'm an adoptive parent as well. My kids were turning 4 and 6 when we got them. So we were on the tail end of that 5, that 5 mark. I had to throw all of that out the window. None of that applied to us. So I couldn't even use it as my measuring stick on anything. That was over and done with. We have what we have. What do we do with this, right? And so rearranging a mindset on attachment, number one, had to remind and rebuild that even though we have years and years of attachment research and literature, and a lot of people would debate a lot of things, most people would agree that attachment is pretty dynamic. It's not static. You can have things that create issues. You can have things that do change how someone might engage in attachment. But the process of connecting to others and being able to connect is a process that grows and changes and builds or decays over time. It's moving. It's not just a standard thing. And with an adult to a child, again, we have a lot of influence over that by how we attach and do things. So one, rearranging the mindset that attachment's dynamic for all of us. How many of us, if we really took stock, could say, I could pinpoint a relationship in my adult life that when it went bad, it really changed how I connected to people in the future. For a while, maybe forever. We all have attachment stuff going on too. So two, that's the other part of it, is we're all in process in this. There's not a group of us who are great and awesome at this with no problems, and then a group who aren't. It is an active process. So it kind of levels the playing field for all of us, and it can help destigmatize the struggles that our kids may face with attachment, and recognizing that we have the ability to see and look at attachment processes to address and make changes in the moment for that to happen. And the last part that I'll say about that I think is a piece often missing, is that attachment is not a passive process. Many people, because of the way attachment builds naturally, one party is not verbalizing from the start, right? They're not saying, I have a need, I need you to connect to me, with spoken words. But because of that, a lot of people have this idea that attachment happens as this passive process by me meeting your needs and you just having your needs met. That's not true at all. There's a very important piece of attachment building that includes signaling and asking for the connection that is missed so often with foster and adoptive children that they end up not building attachment in their new placements, because the foster adoptive parent is meeting all of their needs without requiring signals or asks of it. And it actually slows the attachment process down. And you'll see this isn't an original idea. Karen Purvis talks a lot about this in her trust-based relational intervention in terms of requiring the ask or the signal, and creating signals or verbiage to ask, and being present emotionally with a child until they can ask, so that you can recreate those cycles of when a baby cries, it is signaling a need, and then the person responds and the need is met, which creates attachment. If the baby never cries or doesn't signal a need, it's not like all of our coddling is the thing that creates attachment. It's the signaling and response. And we can't miss, it's so hard for adoptive and foster parents to see a child in need, to know what they need, and to help them respond and request versus just rushing in to meet that need, right? So we sometimes infantilize them. And when a child has language, their emotional outbursts are not actually requests. They are responses to the stimuli around them. They're not requests for attachment. And that makes a big difference. So I'm going to pause and just kind of open it up for you guys to talk.
My brain's exploding right now. So I'm going, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense to think how many people, and the needs of a 10 or 15-year-old are so different and so much more complex than the needs of a baby. And if a baby's crying, they're wet, they're hungry, they're tired, they're something like that. But when you start talking about a teenager or preteen child, I feel like so many foster parents don't know what they need, but they want to meet the needs. So they just rush in to try to do something. And so often, they might be asking and talking and, oh, why don't you do this? And let's do that. And how was your day? And the kid's going like, no way, I don't want you to come at me with all of that. But the foster parent feels that pressure to try to meet the need without
out of the best heart, the best intentions and best heart. This is not a brokenness or an issue. But sometimes it's even our own, maybe like anxious attachment style, right? Like, oh, I gotta attach, gotta connect. And we bump into them. We just don't realize that sometimes what's going on in us is part of the problem. And we have more control over that. It gives us more control. Stacey, you were gonna say something?
I was gonna say, it's kind of funny because I always make my kids ask for what they want. Like you can see them doing the pee-pee dance and you gotta say, we need to stop. We need to stop for the rest. Can we stop for the restroom, please? And like in the car, like they'll say, I'm hot. I said, that's great. What do you need? And they said, will you please turn the air conditioning down? And they get so frustrated with me for not immediately doing what they know that I know they want and making them verbalize it.
Mm-hmm. But you watch that language build in them too, right? And even the neurological shifts where they are making new pathways for asking for what they need, because in them, a lot of times their automatic response when they need something, because when they were so young, when they needed something and signaled, no one came. And so that process stops because it's not a working process. That's a neurological, brilliance that we have built into us, which is great.
The saddest thing in the world is when you get a baby who won't cry. And they've just discovered that crying does nothing for them. So they just don't cry. Yeah. And you think, oh, my first child ever, I thought he was such a good baby. He slept through the night at 3 months. I thought he was just perfect, such a happy baby. No, he had just been so badly neglected that he had given up on crying. And it took some building back up to get him to the point where he was asking for stuff, and he was getting what he needed because he was asking for it, not just you're supposed to feed a baby every 4 hours, or you know what I mean? But I honestly thought, oh, he's such a good baby, he doesn't cry. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's not a good sign, actually.
And that's part of that change of a measuring stick, right? One of the best days of my life as a parent, my daughter, and honestly, the younger a child is, this is also a misrepresentation, misunderstanding. People think that the older a child is, the more difficulty they're going to have adjusting in a foster adoptive home. And typically what you see is that it's the children who it happened to that didn't have language when it was going on, that it's still happening inside of them. They have no language to put to it because it wasn't happening when they had language. They tend to struggle more or in very different ways, especially with connection and attachment. And my daughter was that case. My son had language already. And so it's very different. My two are very different. But one of the best days of my parenting life early on was the day that she was angry at me at night and said, I do not want to pray before bed. I do not want to hug and kiss you, and just left the room and went to bed. And she never came back, because she would always come back about 10 or 15 minutes later because she needed to check and see if we were still okay. And the day that she didn't come back, I was like, she knows we're fine. She knows something has shifted and changed. Our measuring sticks change, right? What we think matters or what we realize matters. So that whole thing of in regular life, a baby not crying a whole lot is a great thing for a parent. It may not be the same. We have to look at everything we measure by as foster and adoptive parents, everything.
And it's kind of funny. I was laughing at myself and my friends. I posted on Facebook, only my friends who are foster parents will appreciate this. I have a 2-year-old who just told me no for the first time, and I'm really excited. Like, because she'd only been placed with me for a couple of days, and I'm like, she finally told me no. She's come out of shell shock. She's telling me no. She's telling me what she wants. Yep. When a 2-year-old tells you no, not everyone gets excited.
Yeah, the willingness of the child to risk letting you know what I want or need when when I've been in a previous situation where that was not listened to, disrespected, or maybe even that set me up to be hit or abused or neglected takes a huge risk. Can I just backfill some of the things? I loved what you were saying, Dina. So this idea of signaling, this comes, we see this in infants because infants are born expecting to have a relationship. Winnicott said there's no such thing as a baby. There's only a baby and its mother. And that's a kind of way of saying a baby isn't born into isolation, a baby is born into relationship. So as you've been talking, one of the main signals of an infant is to cry, which is a signal to the world, somebody come, I need some help. The other social releaser, this is what John Bowlby called them, that are instinctual to babies. They have to be trained out of you if you don't have them, is to smile or to laugh. So an infant learns very quickly to make eye contact, within the first couple of days, and to smile. And as you know, as parents or as adults, if a baby smiles at you, it is almost impossible not to smile back. And this is where that signaling starts to get messed up, right, Dina? So if either the parent is, say, very depressed, we see this in parents who are in refugee camps or in evacuation centers who have maybe lost 3 of their family members, but they're holding their infant in their arms, and the infant's goo-gooing and cooing and all this, but the mother's so preoccupied with her loss that she isn't responding back. That's a way to extinguish that baby's signaling style, right? So crying or smiling, if you've got kids who are stone-faced, they've forgotten how to smile. And I love what you're saying about signaling. And then we have verbal signaling, like asking for what you want. The other thing that I really liked about what you were saying is how it does not help to be a perfect mother or a perfect parent. Winnicott again coined this beautiful phrase, it's better to be a good enough mother than a perfect mother. And what is a good enough mother? A good enough mother is one who doesn't rush right in. The word was pursuing that I was looking for, not just preoccupied, but pursuing. It's if I have a pursuing attachment style as a parent, I'm going to be hovering, I'm going to be rushing in there, I'm going to be meeting the need before the child asks for it. So I love what you're saying here about it's really important to let the kids struggle to make that signal before responding to it. And we call that being a good enough mother. Being a good enough mother is the best kind of mother because you're making mistakes sometimes. If you're a perfect mother, you're not providing enough of a challenging environment for the kid to be able to learn resiliency. That's the word that we're kind of circling around here, is how do we build resiliency in kids that have been knocked down so many times.